Coming up on this Monday edition of Newsline at noon, with President Park Geun-hye visiting Beijing, Korea and China wrap up their 2.5-year-long negotiations over a free trade agreement. Experts say international pressure over North Korea's human rights and Pyongyang's frosty ties with China push the North to release 2 American detainees as it seeks a breakthrough. Plus, Germany celebrates the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, with Chancellor Angela Merkel saying it's proof that dreams can come true. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
It's new Monday, November 10th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in live from Seoul. I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. And we start with the momentous news that the leaders of Korea and China have all but concluded their 30-month-long bilateral negotiations on a free trade agreement between the two countries.
Following talks on the sidelines of the APEC summit in Beijing, President Park Geun-hye and Chinese President Xi Jinping attended the official signing of the trade pact, but officials say the two nations have yet to work on some of the minor details. During President Xi's visit to Seoul in July, the two presidents agreed to finalize their FTA negotiations by the end of the year. Seoul and Beijing have agreed to remove tariffs on more than 90% of their goods over the next 20 years. But compared to all of Korea's other FTAs, the deal contains fewer agricultural products subject to tariff removal, and rice, a super sensitive product for Korean farmers, has been excluded altogether. The FTA is expected to offer the Korean service and agricultural industries a better chance to expand in the Chinese market and increase the appeal of Korea as an investment destination. With this 13th bilateral FTA, Korea has secured free trade with the world's top 3 economies, the U.S., the EU, and China, further bolstering its global trade network. Korea's GDP is expected to grow as much as 1.25% 5 years after the free trade agreement between Korea and China goes into effect. This according to Seoul-based Uri Investment and Securities, which says the FTA will revive Korea's slumping exports to China. The brokerage house says if customs tariffs are cut by 50% over all products, Korea's GDP will increase by 1.1%. Now, in that case, production in Korea's agriculture and fisheries sectors will fall by roughly 0.85%, while production in the manufacturing and service sectors will jump. Uri also expects Korea's auto industry to benefit from the trade pact due to increased car sales to China, but the textile industry will likely suffer as China holds a strong competitive edge thanks to its low labor costs. And China is playing host to this week's APEC summit, and it will be using the opportunity to promote itself as a regional power worthy of leading the way both on the economic and diplomatic fronts. From its vision for creating a trade bloc to a soon-to-be-established bank for infrastructure development, Beijing has set its sights high to keep the other superpower, the U.S., in check. Shi Myung-gil has the details.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has laid out his vision to lead the Asia-Pacific region, both economically and diplomatically. At the top of Beijing's agenda for this week's APEC summit is the Free Trade Area of the Asia-Pacific, or FTAAP. It's part of China's vision to consolidate and simplify the numerous free trade agreements within the region. China hopes to use this week's APEC summit as a venue to study and discuss the costs and benefits of the FTAAP, and would like to see it mentioned in the final draft of the summit's communique. Some Chinese experts view the FTAAP as a strategic move to counter the U.S.-led 12-nation Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, which excludes China. Washington has made implementation of the TPP a priority in expanding trade in the region. On top of the FTA, China will also be pushing its vision to set up the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which has been likened to China's version of the International Monetary Fund. The AIIB, to be established by the end of next year, will help finance infrastructure development in the Asia-Pacific region with an authorized capital of $100 billion. On the diplomatic side, President Xi Jinping has raised the possibility of summit talks with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Ties between the two countries have soured over historical and territorial disputes. But Beijing's relations with Moscow appear to be moving in an opposite direction, as the two grow closer, especially economically, with plans to co-develop natural gas projects worth some $400 billion. China's moves over the course of the coming days are being seen as an attempt to promote its economic and diplomatic rise and its role as a counterbalance to the United States. Kim Hyung-gyun, Arirang News.
And shifting gears, Americans Kenneth Bae and Matthew Miller, who were freed from captivity in North Korea on Saturday, are now safely back with their families in the United States. But questions are being raised about their release. One big question is why? Why did North Korea release them now? Speaking with Arirang News, an expert in Seoul offered his thoughts about Pyongyang's true intentions. Connie Kim reports.
North Korea's surprise release of 2 American detainees is raising questions about Pyongyang's intentions. Some experts believe North Korean leader Kim Jong-un made the move over concerns he and others in his regime will be referred to The Hague for human rights violations.
North Korea is obviously pretty worried about the United Nations referring it to the International Criminal Court. That would be a big loss of faith for the regime in front of its citizens.
Professor Myers said the move could also be an attempt to make Beijing nervous. Although China remains North Korea's strongest ally, bilateral relations have turned cold under the Xi Jinping administration due to the North's nuclear threat. But despite U.S. intelligence chief James Clapper's visit to the North, Washington has made clear that it will not hold talks with Pyongyang unless it first shows sincerity about halting its nuclear program. And then there's a question about what Clapper's trip means for North-South relations.
When the relationship with the United States gets better, the relationship with South Korea gets worse, and vice versa. It's all part of Pyongyang's strategy to divide and conquer, so to speak. But as you know, with North Korea, you always have to expect the unexpected, so I wouldn't count anything out.
Myers says it is doubtful that North Korea will release a South Korean missionary who was detained by the North since last October on charges of anti-state crimes. But that, he said, depends on how much pressure Seoul puts on Pyongyang. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, Germany has marked the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War with a symbolic remembrance of the day. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said the fall of the Berlin Wall showed the world that dreams can come true. Our Son Jung-in reports.
A light installation was set to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall on Sunday. 8,000 illuminated balloons containing personal messages were released along a 15-kilometer stretch of the former border to signify the dissolution of not only the wall, but of the symbolic division between East and West. German Chancellor Angela Merkel led the celebrations attended by tens of thousands of people and honored those who helped bring down the wall, describing its fall as an example of the human desire for freedom. However, the day also served as a reminder that the scars of history remain in the people's hearts. Speaking at a separate event in Berlin, former leader of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, who is credited for his role in reuniting Berlin in 1989, warned that tensions between the U.S. and Russia over Ukraine could plunge the world into a new Cold War.
The world is on the brink of a new Cold War. Some say that it has already begun. And yet, while the situation is dramatic, we do not see the main international body, the UN Security Council, playing any role or taking any concrete action.
Renewed clashes between government forces and Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine over the weekend are raising concerns that tensions between the West and Russia will escalate even further. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now, Japan, the United States and Australia wrapped up their first ever trilateral military exercise on Sunday. Reports say 15,000 troops were involved in the three-day drill in Miyagi Prefecture. The drill was held under the scenario of a major earthquake and tsunami. Japan's Asahi Shimbun reports that the US wants to encourage other countries in the region to join in similar exercises, as Washington is starting to slash back heavily on its defense budget. In last month's revised guidelines for US-Japan defense cooperation, the two nations added a line that said cooperation with other allies in the region is crucial to maintain stability in the Asia-Pacific region.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on Newsline at noon with Mark Broome and Eoh Jin-joo.
I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
Market researcher Strategy Analytics said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about
The Korean stock market has seen little in the way of upward momentum in recent months. In fact, the benchmark KOSPI has performed worse this year than any of the other 15 major markets around the world. According to the Korea Exchange on Monday, the KOSPI is down 3.5% from the beginning of the year. That's the lowest level among bourses that each account for more than 1% of the world's market cap. The only other bourse with negative growth were Germany's DAX, Britain's FTSE 100, and France's CAC 40, all in the minus 2% range. India's Sensex soared 32%, followed by the Shanghai Composite Index and the S&P 500. Foreign investors are cutting back their ownership of Hyundai Motor. Korea's largest automaker has seen its foreign ownership decline to a 4-month low following its decision to spend billions of dollars to buy a plot of land for the construction of a global business center there. The drop is also being contributed to its price competitiveness that's being eroded against Japanese rivals. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Foreign investors are increasingly selling their shares in Hyundai Motor on worries that Korea's largest automaker is not focusing on profitability at a time it is losing its price competitiveness against its Japanese rivals. Data from the Korea Exchange shows foreign investors' holdings in Hyundai Motor dropped to 44.4% in November, its lowest point in 4 months. The foreign flight has been apparent since September, when the company bought a plot of land in downtown Seoul for 3 times its appraised value. During the 1.5-month period, foreigners sold nearly $460 million worth of Hyundai shares, causing the market value of the company to slump 20% to just over $31.4 billion. Apart from Hyundai's controversial land buy, what really had foreign investors running for the hills was the automaker's falling earnings performance during the April to September period. Operating profits plunged more than 15% from the same period last year to $3.4 billion. Watchers say Hyundai Motor is struggling to compete against Japanese automakers, which have been buoyed by Tokyo's expansionary monetary policies that have weakened the yen. The Japanese currency dropped by more than 5% against the greenback since the Bank of Japan announced an additional monetary easing policy at the end of October. During the April to September period, operating profits for Japan's largest automaker, Toyota, jumped nearly 8% to $11.8 billion. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, the Korean government will provide roughly $281 million to major international financial institutions like the World Bank next year. That total is up slightly from this year's contribution of $275 million. The Finance Ministry says around $36 million will go directly to the World Bank, and this will raise Korea's share in that institution to over 1.5% by 2016, up from 1% back in 2010. While that will give Korea a stronger say in the international financial world, pundits warn it could also hurt the country's financial health because it diverts funds from an economy that is running a fiscal deficit. Now, gone are the days when companies could only really market their products on TV or in newspapers or magazines. Today, YouTube marketing is where it's at. And analysts say that YouTube ads are everything that TV commercials aren't. They're engaging, targeted, and most importantly, much more affordable. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
Viral frenzy. Korea's distribution industry is taking its marketing campaigns online, and they're getting funnier and more sensational. This video featuring a fashion brand's fall and winter collection got 1.9 million views in just the first 2 weeks after going on YouTube.
YouTube marketing allows us to better deliver the story and concept of our brand. We can also check out instantly who is interested in our products, and the popularity of the ad leads to increased sales.
Paldo, a local food and beverage company, saw sales of its traditional rice drink Sikhae jump 35% after the release of an online ad, which it says allowed them to reach a larger consumer base. In some cases, it's not just about sales and numbers. This campaign of an online shopping mall, for one, looks to rebuild its image with a thank you message to postal workers.
Some people have a negative view about shopping advertisements, saying that it promotes spending. However, we actually see it as a way of linking people. We wanted to show our philosophy through the ad.
YouTube and other popular internet sites have become a favorite marketing tool among companies. Unlike conventional TV ads, online advertisements are relatively cheap, can offer context, a sense of immediacy, and personalization all at once.
Industry watchers say although it costs less to produce these advertisements, the positive effects can be greater as the company gets its message out to a wider audience, especially if it goes viral. And the craze has boosted growth in the online ad market, particularly the mobile sector. Last year, the mobile advertisement market was valued at nearly $400 million, more than a five-fold increase from 2011. That makes up about 4% of the total domestic ad market. And with the exponential growth in the use of smart mobile devices, watchers say it's a market that is sure to get bigger. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, steel is one of Korea's major export items, with outbound shipments accounting for more than half of the country's GDP.
Right, but Posco, the country's leading steel maker, is losing ground in the global market in the face of cheap Chinese steel. In this week's Industry Insider, Hwang Jie tells how Posco is weathering the storm.
In the late 90s, Posco was the #1 company in the global steel market in terms of productivity. But that was a long time ago. Today, it's the world's 6th largest steel maker, with Chinese mills quickly making up ground, or in some cases, even moving past Posco. Is it a sign of things to come? Take a look.
China's steel exports are as strong now as they've ever been, hitting a record high in September. This has a lot to do with Chinese steelmakers looking to the global market with a slowdown in the domestic economy, but their low prices are also enticing global clients. This is bad news for Korea's largest steelmaker, Posco.
Chinese competitors are starting to export to markets that Posco does, which means more competition and slumping steel prices.
Given the market conditions, then, it should come as no surprise that Posco's sales and profits have been on the slide for the past 3 years. Adapting to the new landscape, Posco, which has nearly 50 affiliates, is offloading its non-steel units like department stores. But analysts say such a strategy cannot be a cure-all for Posco.
Posco should expand its marketing network and strategic alliances with its customers to innovate its steel products by cooperating with its customers.
In fact, the Korean steelmaker is already doing that, calling it strategy solution marketing. Posco has pledged to contribute to the development of its customers by introducing products that cater specifically to their needs. For example, by teaming up with French automaker Renault, Posco developed high-strength but lightweight steel products for Renault's new hybrid car, leveling the playing field against cheap but lower-quality steel from China. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Time now to get a check on some of the other global headlines we're following this hour. For that, we have our Eunice Kim joining us from the News Center.
Now, Eunice, after weeks of U.S. airstrikes in Iraq and Syria, U.S. President Barack Obama is now shifting to what he calls a new phase in the battle against the group that calls itself Islamic State.
Right, Mark. He's doubling up on the number of American military advisors dispatched to Iraq as the fight transitions to one that is more offensive than defensive in nature. Connie Lee has more.
U.S. President Barack Obama is calling it a new phase in the fight against Islamic State. In an interview with CBS News, the president said the decision to send 1,500 more U.S. troops into Iraq, or nearly double the current number, shows the U.S. is in a position to start going on some offense, rather than just trying to halt the momentum of the Islamic State, or IS. President Obama reiterated that the troops will not be engaged in combat operations, but provide additional training for Iraqi soldiers and militia fighters on the ground. It may be helping. Recent video from Iraq's defense ministry shows its army recapturing 3 villages from IS militants west of Baghdad.
Troops of the 17th Infantry Division, 60th Brigade, backed by air support from Army Aviation, destroyed hideouts of Daesh in Al Refuge area. You have seen the bodies, and victory was achieved.
Meanwhile, U.S. officials have not yet confirmed reports that the leader of IS, Abu Bakr Baghdadi, was injured during an airstrike on Friday that hit a gathering of militant leaders in the northern Iraqi town of Mosul. With IS militants already having seized large areas in Iraq and Syria, President Obama is asking Congress for $5.6 billion for operations to stop their progress. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
More than 2 million citizens in Spain's wealthy region of Catalonia went to the polls on Sunday to vote in a largely symbolic poll on whether or not it should be a state independent from Spain. The move comes in defiance of an earlier order by the country's constitutional court to suspend what it called an unconstitutional referendum. With 88% of the votes counted, the Catalan government said 1.6 million of its 7.5 million people had voted for forming a new nation. Nationalism has been brewing in Catalonia and its capital of Barcelona as the region contributes more to the Spanish economy than it receives in government funds. More help is coming to Ebola-stricken countries in West Africa, this time from China and Japan. Beijing says it will build a medical center in Liberia equipped with 100 beds and deploy up to 1,000 aid workers to Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. So far, China has sent well over $120 million in aid. Japan has announced plans to send thousands of doses of the anti-influenza drug Arirang, which showed promise against Ebola in clinical testing. In a Washington Post op-ed, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said the world is on the right track, with infection rates showing a slowdown in some parts while it is rising in others. He urged continued vigilance until the ultimate goal of 0 Ebola cases is achieved. Finally, authorities in Japan are struggling to clamp down on the public's use of DAPO, or loophole drugs. The drugs have been described as dangerous but not banned outright, as their chemical formula slightly differs to those forbidden by the government. The Hyogo Prefectural Assembly became the first to pass an ordinance late last week that would regulate the sellers of DAPO starting December 1st. According to a survey released by Japan's Fire and Disaster Management Agency, the quasi-legal narcotics hospitalized nearly 4,500 people since the year 2009. And in June of this year, a man who killed 1 and injured 6 others in a traffic accident was believed to be under its influence.
Unlike the cold morning we had, it should feel much nicer in the afternoon with daily highs reaching into the mid to upper teens. And the high pressure front will provide lots of sunshine, so sunny skies will be featured all day long across the nation. So with that, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. Now the daytime high in the capital will top out at 16, while Daegu and Gwangju will rise to 18 and 17, and Busan should climb into 19 this afternoon. On to other regions. Jeju Island and Daejeon will peak at 16 and 17 respectively, while Dokdo climbs into 14. Well, this week will be a transition period from autumn to winter, and on Thursday, on the day of the college entrance exam here in Korea, should be the coldest of the week. The low will drop to freezing marks and highs will only make it to 9. So for those who are taking a test on that day, be sure to bundle up tight. That's all for now. Back to you, Mark and Yusan in the back to you, Mark and Jin-joo in the studio.
Well, thank you, Jiren, for that update. And that brings us to the end of our Monday edition of Newsline at noon.
Yes, Jin-joo and I will be back at the same time tomorrow. Goodbye.